we are now going into a stage where it's getting a little bit more dissipated. And the reason for this is also because a lot of the players now want to be closer to where the data is consumed, especially given that 5G is coming in. And the way 5G operates, you need to be as close to your data consumers as possible to ensure low latency. So we are seeing the demand, the supply getting a little bit more dissipated. Having said that, Mumbai being, the financial services hub, is still expected to get a chunk of the supply and demand as well.
Welcome to the Blue Circle, an exclusive keynote address for Blue Circle members. It's such a big privilege and pleasure to connect with everyone, and our distinguished keynote speaker, who is handpicked because of the think input and the rich experience she brings in. Thank you also to our distinguished audience for joining us, most of whom are CEOs, CXOs, and senior leaders. Many of them are our members and are repeat visitors to our webinars. This is very encouraging and motivates us to provide even higher levels of dialogue through the online mode as well. For those of you who are new with us today, Blue Circle is the world's first sector-specific networking app for industry leaders that's built in India. We currently focus on 20 sector communities such as e-mobility, renewable energy, real estate, healthcare, aerospace and defense, and many more. We also present socioeconomic insights, which ultimately determine the evolving complexion of the market. Along with our weekly webinar series and our digital publication, you will be happy to know that we have recently launched the first version of the Blue Circle app for industry professionals, somewhat like the sector-specific LinkedIn, a space to have meaningful conversations, connect with over 15,000 plus like-minded leaders from India and across the globe, house high-quality curated content, and access business opportunities across these sectors. Now, without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce today's keynote speaker, Ms. Devi Shankar. She's the President, Industrial Logistics Data Center at Anarock Capital. With an experience of over 18 years, Ms. Shankar has worked in the entire gamut of investments from private equity, investment banking, and structuring. With this wealth of all-round exposure, in her current role at Anarock Capital, she focuses on investment banking, land acquisition, leasing, and co-location scales. Prior to Anarock, she had assumed a P&L responsibility with the large private sector warehousing group, where she was primarily responsible for fundraising for development of warehouses, apart from corporate finance initiatives, including strategic acquisitions, business development, technology adoption, and overall business and revenue growth. And for today's topic, Ms. Shankar will be discussing data center explosion in India. I request Ms. Shankar to please begin the session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Gautam. So, yeah, data centers has been, a topic that has been quite aggressively discussed. The media has, been covering it very frequently as well. And there is, sunrise. This is a sunrise sector, which is kind of gaping through a hockey stick growth as we sit today. And I'll quick. I know I have a very limited time session here, but I will run through the key aspects of the data center industry in India, and I will leave it open for questions if any. But quickly before I start the session, why are we discussing data centers? I think some of the key pointers. We are a growing market since the time Modi has come in. We all know that we have we have really gone on the path of digitization. Telecom tariffs have been extremely cheap. It's the cheapest in the world in India, which has also led to penetration, including rural penetration of mobile data. And therefore, we are looking at a huge amount of data being generated in the country. And there needs to be a place to save all this data, right? Currently, all of our data is being stored in Ireland and Singapore and other parts of the world. But there is a data localization law that India also wants to bring in, and Once the law comes into picture, all of that data, massive data that we're generating on a daily basis, needs to be stored in India. And that's where we are looking at data center becoming a very critical infrastructure. Like I often say this, we talk of food, clothing, shelter, then we added health, education, but data centers is a critical infrastructure, because without data centers, we may not be able to we spend so much time on our phone, we may not be able to run any of the apps if data centers weren't there. So it is a critical infrastructure, and that's why we are speaking about this today. So quickly, there is a data explosion happening in India. If you look at the screen, we've just given some key highlights. Today, on an average, every user in India is consuming about 17 GB of data per month. This number used to be 1.24 GB in 2017. So you can see from 17 to 22, we have like exponentially increased the amount of data that we consume. India is the second highest has the second highest average traffic per smartphone in the world. The Gulf nations are the highest. India is the second highest in data traffic on mobile. We are expected, the 17 GB is expected to go to 50 GB per month per user by 2027. So there's a massive amount of data that is going to get generated. And what do we do with all this data? How do we handle all this data? Is a big question, not just for us, because we keep talking of privacy, but for the government as well. Data is being used constantly by every company, every corporate in their decision making. And how do we handle this data is very critical. And that's the juncture we are in today in our country. Again, some key statistics in India as compared to some of the global economies. Let's just, I'm not sure if Blue Circle will be sharing this presentation. I'm happy to send this across to them. But let's just, for the purpose of this presentation, compare ourselves with China, which is kind of, of a similar size as us. So we have about 30-90 million population. China is about 1410. Internet penetration in China is about 73%. As compared to that, in India, we are at about 45%. So a long way to go for us. Look at the e-commerce shoppers, 842 million in China as compared to 150 million in India. So this gives us a sense of where we could be headed if China is with a similar population size is at 842 million. There's like really a lot of room for us to grow. And the value of digital payments close to 3 billion, close to $3 trillion, and in India we are at 547 billion. As against all of this data, how much capacity of data center do we have? So in China, we have about 2,100 megawatts of data center capacity, over 400 data centers. In India, we are just at 737. So a lot of room to cover, just at the state that we are today, and plus a lot of room to cover for the data explosion that we are thinking will come about in India with the growing data consumption. Uh, Almost all countries across the world are today focusing on data sovereignty, data residency, which is basically about ensuring that the data that is generated in their country is stored within the country. Um, 71% of the countries in the world have some form of data privacy laws today. In India as well, we had the data protection bill, which has now been withdrawn. We were hoping for it to get implemented soon, but it has now been withdrawn because it needed to be more aligned with the Indian scenario. But quickly, just glancing through the Indian data protection bill, it was pretty stringent the way it was. It was more stringent than a lot of our global laws in place currently. So, for example, if we see all the data in possession, whether it is before or after enactment, needed to be stored in India. Data storage and processing both had to be in India. Cross-border transfer of data was prohibited. It could only be done under certain conditions. And the more draconian law, which came in sometime late last year, was that this law, the bill extended not just to personal data but non-personal data as well. which really covered a lot more data in its ambit than what was originally envisaged. We will have to wait and watch. But this is a very important bill that the government is working on, and we will need to see the form in which it comes. But this is one of the key drivers of data center growth in India, because this is a law that says that data that is generated in India needs to be stored in India, and that is what has caused the enormous amount of data center growth, uh, and uh, and led to the attention that the data center industry globally has been seeing India with. So, quick summary of where we are in terms of the industry. As of today, as of March of this year, we have 138 data centers, um, spanning about 11 million square feet, with a capacity of 737 megawatts. Where do we see this growing to as of 2025? That is about 2 years, little more than 2 years from now. We think the number of 138 will go to 183. Um, in terms of the number of data centers, that's not a major jump, but just look at the size. So as compared to 737, we will be at 1752, which is almost 1.7 gigawatts of capacity by 2025. The 11 million square feet will expand to 24 million square feet of data center space. So this is where we are headed towards. We are doubling our capacity. In fact, more than doubling our capacity in just little over 3 years. If we look at this industry from a more drilled down geographical perspective, you can see that Mumbai takes a chunk of the data center supply. Um, as of now, we are at 50%. Even as of 2025, this number is expected to be 50%. So we are at about 49 and 50, approximately the same, followed by Chennai at 15%. The reason why Mumbai and Chennai have been a hub for data centers is because this is where we have our cable landing stations, from which the fiber optical network is taken to the site, to the data center site. Because of the cable landing stations, Mumbai and Chennai have been hot favorites. But having said that, we are now going into a stage where it's getting a little bit more dissipated, and the reason for this is also because a lot of the players now want to be closer to where the data is consumed, especially given that 5G is coming in. And the way 5G operates, you need to be as close to your data consumers as possible to ensure low latency. So we are seeing the supply getting a little bit more dissipated. Having said that, Mumbai being, the financial services hub, is still expected to get a chunk of the supply and demand as well. The data center market in terms of size, currently we are at about $5.6 billion. If we look at the revenue, we have grown from $385 million in 2014 to $1.2 billion of revenue in 2021. Just in the last 2 years, that is the COVID years, the revenue has grown by 10% year on year. This shows that, post COVID, we have actually started relying a lot more on technology. Uh, like, most of our payments today is online. We use very limited cash payments. We consume a lot more social media content on OTT platforms. Organizations have started moving a lot of their data to cloud, and all of this, results in data storage requirements. So we can see that reflected in the numbers as well. We have grown at 10% per annum in the last 2 years in terms of revenue, and our EBITDA margins have been increasing as well. So from a 21% EBITDA margin in 2014, today we are at about a 33% EBITDA margin, and this number is expected to go up to a 40 to 50% in the next 2 to 3 years. Some of the key data center trends. So we did a survey of data center of data professionals, IT managers, mainly the CIOs, CISOs, um, IT infrastructure heads, and we bounced off a few questions to understand what could be the potential trends that we can expect in the data center industry. And some of the findings, I've just summarized some of the findings here, and I'll be happy to just run you through this. um, one one of the things that most of the people told us was that bringing in operational efficiencies and cost savings to their data centers are very high on priority. Data center a as a asset class is a power guzzling industry. It consumes huge amount of power. It needs cooling technologies, which you have to have your cooling systems running 24/7 to keep the servers cool. And there is a lot of energy that is consumed, and this leads to a lot of cost. How do you bring down these costs, and how do you ensure that you're operating efficiently is a major concern for most of the IT professionals. And we also are in a stage where there's a lot of R&D happening, different mechanisms of power and cooling that's being experimented, and that we could see coming up in the next few years. 37% of the IT managers said that they would rather outsource the IT infrastructure assessment, monitoring, and operations than do it themselves. These are low value jobs for most of the IT managers, and they would rather outsource it than do it themselves. 30% of the respondents said they would prefer a hybrid of cloud and data center. This is a constant decision making that we see amongst a lot of companies today. Which apps should we place on cloud? What should we host in our own data centers? Where do we keep our data centers, captive or in a co-location facility? Should we be on a private cloud? Should we be on a public cloud? And these are some major decisions that are being taken by a lot of the IT managers. And your enterprise architecture depends a lot on these decisions. And it's very important to ensure that these decisions lead you to allow to use data in a very efficient manner for your decision making. 30% of our respondents said that they would prefer to have a mix of cloud and data centers rather than going completely on cloud or hosting all their information on a data center. um, Within data centers, majority of the IT professionals felt it's better to be co-located in the third-party data centers than have your servers in your own office or factories. Clearly, there are a lot of benefits of being with a co-location data center operator, because you can take benefit of the economies of scale of the operations of the facility. Um, it's easier to bring in sustainability aspects in a larger facility than making your smaller captive data center sustainable. Sustainability is a major goal today for most of the companies. So from all those perspectives, co-location has been voted as better than having a captive data center. 72% of the IT professionals uh, voted that there has been a significant data surge in their organizations post COVID-19. And therefore, these decisions with respect to cloud and data centers have kind of taken center stage in the scope of work for these professionals. Power regulations are one of the key points that a lot of data center operators and enterprises struggle with, because power is a state subject. Um, Getting liaising with the right power officials, navigating through different power regulations, all that is extremely important for IT professionals. This is something that the government can do more in terms of creating the right enabling the right infrastructure for data center operations. Data compression is something that is very critical, because with the volumes of data that we are generating, ensuring that we are able to save more data in a single server is extremely important. And also your power usage effectiveness. How much power do you need to consume in your facility is also something that is, people are being conscious about it because lesser the power, more efficiency that can be brought in and better cost savings. This is also a huge industry for from an employment perspective. In the next 4 to 5 years, we need massive amount of talent across different verticals, across different skill sets, and hiring, recruiting the right talent is challenging today because of lack of the right pool of skill sets. And therefore, this is again one of the factors where IT professionals are grappling with to ensure that they're getting the right talent. And I spoke of sustainability some time back. 64% of the organizations are looking to power their data centers by more than 60% clean power. So more than 60% of the data center power is expected to be consumed through green power or cleaner sources of energy in the next 2 years. To summarize, uh, there are a few things, on which the data center growth today, um, uh, the trends are shaping in India today on the data center industry. One, we are the at the bottom of a hockey stick growth, with the kind of data explosion that is expected to happen. We could be moving up on a hockey stick curve very soon, and therefore the data center growth really has to keep up with the data explosion that we are expecting to see in the next 4 to 5 years. And this is quite encouraging because this is, as an industry, as a country, we become more self-reliant. We'll be able to decide how to deal with our data, ensure that there's enough data privacy with the right laws coming in. And we'll be able to create the enabling infrastructure to ensure that we are self-reliant in terms of our data storage. I spoke of 5G coming in and how with 5G, uh, the data centers need to be closer to the data consumption or to the user of the data. So we will see a lot of edge data centers, which is basically, edge is the term which is given to data centers which are closer to the data consumption. Um, we will see a lot of edge data centers coming up in India to ensure that we're catering to as many data users as possible in different locations. India is a vast country. There are many data hubs, smaller data hubs apart from the main cities. Um, even cities, tier 2 cities today are as as modern in their thinking. They want to watch OTT. They are focused on cloud, and therefore there is a need not just to focus on cities but also to look at some of these smaller towns which are becoming data hubs. So we will see at least about 250, on a conservative basis, 150 to 200, but that number could be higher as well. We could see at least about 200 edge data centers coming up in India. The number that I had gave earlier, which was 138 moving to 183, is actually could be much higher if we see the amount of edge data centers that we envisage coming in. Like I just mentioned, we will not just see data centers in tier 1 cities, but some of the tier 2 cities as well, which have their own market for data generation and consumption, will also see data centers coming up to cater to those markets. So tier 2 cities as well will pick up, although this is a longer uh, timeline and a longer investment tenure, but we will see tier 2 cities as well coming up pretty soon. And last but not the least, the government will play a major role in this industry. First and foremost, we need to have the data protection law in place, which is right now withdrawn, and we need to wait for the new law to come in. But that apart, just in terms of ensuring that the data center industry, which is now a, a recognized as an infrastructure, gets the right support, whether it's through approvals, single window clearances, um, the necessary exemptions duties or taxes, all of that, putting an entire infrastructure in place that allows data centers to grow quickly without having much bottlenecks, simplifying power regulations. Power itself is a very complicated subject in India. So simplifying power regulations, allowing single window clearances, all of these are extremely important in ensuring the success of data centers in India. So these are just a few parting thoughts, and with that, I'll be happy to take questions. That was a quick run through, and I'll be happy to share this presentation as well with Gautam, who can in turn share it with everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Shankar. Beautiful presentation. Really enjoyed going through it, and I'm sure whoever asked for the presentation, I'll be happy to share it with them as well. I'll quickly jump into the Q&A section. We've got a few questions already, and it would be great to have your thoughts and inputs about the same as well. The first is coming from Akshay. He's saying power is the main raw material for data centers. Every single instance of downtime at a data center can entail a significant cost. What are companies and government doing to provide uninterrupted supply of electricity?
So that's right. Power is one of the main raw materials for a data center, and we can't afford to have even a single second of outage. It can cause major losses, financial losses to companies. Right now, this the some of the states where data centers are coming up, like Noida in Uttar Pradesh, or Maharashtra, Mumbai, and Pune, in Maharashtra, Hyderabad and Telangana, and a lot of other states, Karnataka, they are all, the state governments are being extremely supportive. They're ensuring that power is made available for data centers. In a lot of cases, these approvals are also coming in a very timely manner. So yes, the government is providing whatever support it can. The question actually is that when we actually begin to implement it, because we're going to see a huge amount of data centers coming in, which will consume a lot of power. I think from just the way we look at it right now, there is a lot of support, but how much of this power will actually come in, the implementation of it is something we'll have to wait and watch. I'm sincerely hoping that the governments, because they are being very cooperative, we will not have any issues when it comes to power. Also, today green power is something, all of these data centers will have at least 50 to 60% green power. Either most of them are looking at uh, having their own setups, or they are tying up with renewable developers to on a long term power purchase agreement to procure clean power. So that is another major source. Now, of course, we have the whole question of whether our transmission infrastructure is resilient enough for this green power to come in. So there are, of course, questions to be answered, but we will have to wait and watch to see, how all this pans out. But your question is very valid, and it is a major infrastructure where the government definitely needs to be very conscious in terms of how it goes about supporting the industry.
Thank you. I'll move on to the next question. And before that, Akshay, thank you for the building question. I hope your answers also. I hope Ms. Shankar has given your answer correctly as well. If you do have any thoughts, please do share. Move on to the next question by Aarti. She's saying the water consumed by data centers is immense, but the data of utilization is quite sparse. Is there any law requiring the disclosure of water consumption by data centers in India? India having only approx 4% of the world's fresh water. How does government plan to monitor its usage, and what other methods can be used to cool the data centers?
So Aarti, I will try and answer this as best as I can, because I'm not a technical person, but I will try and answer this as best as I can. Um, a lot of data centers today cater to the hyperscalers like Google and Microsoft and Amazon, who at their US data centers are doing a lot of R&D on not just on ESG, and ESG is a much broader term. So clean power is just one of it, but it's a it's the entire chain. How do you ensure that your water is recycled, your disposal systems are in place? How do you ensure all of these are all aspects which are currently being researched by all of these large major hyperscalers. Data center operators also have to ensure that these mechanisms um, are in line with what their customers, which is the hyperscalers, need. So I personally know that there are operators today who have been experimenting on newer technologies within their facilities, and I have visited some of these data centers and I've seen those emerging technologies. There is a lot of R&D happening, and I'm pretty sure that these will only evolve for the better. So there is, just like you posed your question, it is something which is there as one of the criteria that everyone's working on. And I'm pretty sure that there will be more research on this to ensure that we are able to manage our operations efficiently.
Thank you. Um, so I'll move on to the next one by Rakesh Malhotra. He's saying retail co-location versus wholesale data centers. Which one would you recommend business to go for and why?
So it both of them have their own um, uh, uh, business reasons, right, to go for. It depends on what, as a data center operator, one would want to be in. If you have a large uh, resource pool in place which can target a lot of these smaller, target, maintain, operate and manage a lot of small customers, then definitely you can go in for retail co-location. Retail co-location also has its own requirements, because there will be a lot of smaller companies, smaller cloud companies, government departments that may not need big capacities. They may need smaller capacities. So the business reason is very much there for a retail or a wholesale co-location. The reason why somebody would do a wholesale and not a retail co-location is because wholesale is easier. You have lesser customers. You're managing larger capacities with lesser customers. So it becomes much more easier. It's like, retail co-location is like running a hotel. You have to manage churn on a very regular basis. Do you have the wherewithal to do it? If yes, it's definitely a play. Obviously your returns are much higher in a retail co-location, but also your risks of vacancy and ensuring that you're operating it efficiently is also that much more. So it actually depends on which part of the audience you want to cater to, and whether you have the ability to have that necessary resources in place to manage a retail co-location facility.
Beautifully put. Thank you. Thank you so much. I will move on to the next question by Govind Krishnan. Saying, is it because of the climatic disadvantage that the PUE of Indian data centers are in the range of 1.5 to minus 1.7, whereas globally it lies between 1.1 to 1.3?
Yeah, that um, is right in a way. So India is a tropical country, and therefore your PUEs are much higher. It's difficult to go down beyond a certain level. Today, a lot of the data center operators are looking at 1.4, 1.4 to 1.5. We have traditionally been at 1.7, 1.8, going up to 2. But like I said, ensuring that your PUEs are lower, power efficiencies are high, is an important goal for a lot of data center operators, because it brings down the overall cost. Today we are getting so competitive. You have to give your customers a certain advantage, and therefore today most of the design PUEs are between 1.4 to 1.5. To my mind, it's very difficult to go below that unless we come with some breakthrough technology. But yeah, it is the climate plays a major role in this.
Sure. Thank you. The next question is around greening of DCs. I know you've already covered it, but I'll just share it just in case if you missed out and you'd want to add anything else. The question is, with India having pledged to cut India's carbon emissions by 1 billion tons by 2030, what is the Indian government doing about the greening of DCs, optimizing emissions and power consumption?
So I don't know if the government has a specific role in this. um, the they are more supporting rather than taking the initiative when it comes to green DCs. Having green DCs is an initiative that comes from the industry. So anyone who's making a massive, data center, a large data center with capacities of 30, 40, 50 megawatt is going to consume so much power. It's in their interest to ensure that a large portion of that is being met through green and clean sources of power. So it's an individual initiative. Also because customers, end enterprises, and cloud companies are getting very conscious about their environmental impact. What the government can do is to ensure that the infrastructure is resilient enough to allow green power to be transmitted as efficiently as thermal power. That is something the government should ensure that they take care of. But otherwise, it's an individual initiative that the industry has to take to ensure that we are moving towards green. And all of the operators have ESG as a major goal. So today it's a big, big, big hot topic and goal for a lot all the operators, in fact.
Thank you. I'll move on to the next question by Babu GK around the HR point of view. He's saying, what are the specific skill set that will be in demand for this industry?
So it depends. I mean, across there are a lot of roles that will need filling up, but primarily engineers. Engineers who understand different aspects of mechanical, cooling, power, and then we have operational staff. That need to understand how this whole to keep the data center running, technology from an IoT perspective to bring in to make data centers smart enough to ensure that any power outages or any inefficiencies can be detected well beforehand. Sales professionals who have to keep, like, I just got the question of retail versus wholesale co-location. If you have for both of it, in fact, you need sales professionals who can bring in the customers. So it's a full-fledged business like any other business. You will have each of those roles that needs to be filled in, but engineers will play a major role in data centers.
Surely. I move on to the next question by Suresh Nair. It's a little technical. He's saying, how do you calculate capacity of data centers? What is 1 MW of megawatt of data center capacity?
So that's the power that your server consumes. When I say IT capacity, it's how much power your servers can consume. So if I say that a facility is a 1 megawatt IT capacity, that's the power that will be available for your servers, for all the customer servers that are placed over there to be able to consume. They may or may not consume the whole power, but that's what the capacity can make available. It's different from the facility power because not just the servers running the entire facility also takes power. So you have the server, the capacity that the power that the server consumes, which is the IT power, and then you have the gross facility power. The delta between that is what we call the PUE. So we try and make the PUE much more efficient and lower the PUE to ensure that we are at a facility level operating very efficiently.
So you spoke of the new data center policy, which is yet to come or going to be rolled out in India. Rohit Kaul is asking, will they ease out in coming times?
The data,
Data center policies.
we are hoping they will, because it somewhere, I think the government also realized that it's like the frog in boiling water, right? You keep increasing the temperature of the water, and the frog is getting so used to it that it doesn't realize that the water is getting hotter. So it was kind of like that. They, every time they would review the policy, they would add something, and it kept getting more and more stringent. But I think what happened is that the joint parliamentary committee that reviewed the policy in December last year, they realized that it needs major changes to make it more suitable for an Indian environment, and therefore they decided to just withdraw it and redraft it instead of making a bunch of changes in the same law. So we are hoping that it will be more in line with in line with the business, and it will be the business as well as the consumers, because it has to protect privacy of the end users, at the same time ensuring that it's not too stringent from a business perspective. So let's hope. I mean, we'll have to wait and watch.
Thank you. Tapas is asking, with the boom in data centers, what other industries or domains will it impact and how?
So all the ancillary industries, like you need servers, you have all your MEP that comes as a part of your building. So all of those are industries, manufacturing industries that will have a boom. In fact, that's also covered in the national data center policy that we have. All of these ancillary industries are also given benefits if a data center is procuring these indigenously. So those are definitely ancillary industries that will have a big impact. Then, of course, the infrastructure that goes into data centers, like power, including green power, your fiber parts, optical fiber. That's another big raw material for data centers. So all of these industries will see massive boom. Telecom, because of the requirement of ISPs coming in. All of those will have will have its growth along with the data center industry.
Thank you, Ms. Shankar. I'll move on to another question. I'm just going to take about 2-3 minutes of more of your time. Govind Krishnan is asking another question. He's saying, where are Indian data centers placed relative to the global data centers in terms of technology?
So it's difficult for me to answer that because I've myself not gone and seen a lot of the data centers outside India. But um, I would say that a lot of the data centers in India are they stack up well to global technology. Um, Although historically we have operated at a very small scale. So you know my first slide, if you see, you can see this average capacity per data center has been about 5 megawatts. In future, we see that doubling to about 10 megawatts. Now, as in smaller facilities, it's actually difficult to implement a lot of technology as well. But when you have much larger facilities, like the monster facilities, which is 50, 60, going up to 100 megawatts, that's where you can actually implement global technology. We also have a lot of global operators who are coming into India. These operators um, have their data centers currently in US and Europe, and those best practices are also expected to come to India. So I'm guessing that we will see all that. Or like I said, we on the pub on the cooling. There was an experiment being done by one of the data center operators in one of their facilities, and these are all stuff which is coming from outside India. So I'm guessing that we will see a lot of the technology adoption coming as we increase our scale. I would say right now we've been too small to have as much of technology as some of our global ones have. But we are. I don't think we. I mean, if I just look at the tier 1 developers, the top 5 or 6 operators, I think they have been having data centers which have been well maintained, which are on a very basic infrastructure perspective, uh, to global specs. Of course, in terms of technology, I think we will grow as our scale improves.
Thank you. So there's another question, and you pointed this out about the privacy laws. So the question is saying that, as you mentioned, the data privacy laws in India is yet to be implemented. So as of now, is data privacy compromised?
We don't have a law to you know for enterprises that are using their data to as to how they can use it. So in that sense, yeah, there is no law. Whenever we accept terms and conditions, we are accepting the terms and conditions for everyone to use our data. Now, also our data is not stored in India right now. It's stored outside India, so it's being processed. It's being analyzed, it's being processed, and we don't have much control on it. So to that extent, see, compromise is a very a heavy word. I wouldn't say compromised, but yes, our data is being used, in ways that we may not be able to see. But once the data privacy law comes in, hopefully there are a bunch of the idea is that there should be no data breaches. India is has the third highest amount of data breaches in the world today, which basically means that we are susceptible to hacking and all that. The idea is to ensure that your data that is stored is safe and is not being misutilized or hacked. So that's where we should see more, stringent regulations coming in. But I wouldn't really say that it's our data is being compromised. Our data is being used, and that's the case globally, right? All data is being used. It's, we have to some extent some apps are allowing us to, decide how we, whether or not we consent to our data being used. But that's a much bigger discussion than data centers itself.
Thank you. I'll just move on to the last question, and thank you so much for your time as well. Govind Krishnan again is asking, what can be the typical life cycle of a data center? What can be the incremental capex for the upgradation of the racks or cooling equipments?
So Govind, unfortunately, like I said, I'm not the technical person, but most of these equipments have longer lives. So I would not be able to answer your question in terms of what is the capex. We are still in the early cycle of development right now. But yes, there will be capex that will be incurred. There will be technology upgradations that will keep happening because this is a tech industry as well. So not just, the age of the equipments, but also upgradations, because things keep evolving. Those are also costs. So in a way, I'll just make a macro statement that yes, it is a high capex industry. How much that capex is, it's very difficult to quantify. I mean, only an operator can do that because they are running the facility. It's difficult for me to put a number to it right now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Shankar. So on this note, I'll just want to say such an insightful and engaging session and a privilege to hear you. Our guests and I have been hooked on till the end, and I'm sure they've taken home several nuggets as you've shared. And also thank you to our leaders in the audience for joining us and for staying till the end and for always sharing excellent questions.
Thank you, Gautam. It was a pleasure, and I'm happy that there was so many questions that came in. I hope I was able to answer some of the questions.
No, I think it was brilliant, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, bye.